Welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into the fascinating story of Davenport, Iowa. Now, if you visit the Quad Cities today, Davenport looks like a bustling, modern logistics hub. But to truly understand its DNA, we have to rewind. We're going to unpack how Davenport's deeply contested, highly dramatic, and often violent frontier beginnings didn't just build a random Midwestern town. They literally paved the exact path for the transcontinental expansion of the entire United States. So, the core question we are tackling today is this: how exactly does a rough, contested frontier outpost trigger a legal war that changes American commerce forever? Because let's be real, the origins of Davenport are way bigger than just local history. They are the epicenter of a massive 19th century clash. We are talking about a full-on collision of empires, indigenous nations, and titan industries that ultimately culminated in a legal battle that would permanently alter the course of the country. Section 1. The Contested Frontier Land. Empires collide on the Mississippi. To understand how Davenport even came to be, we first have to look at the geopolitical battleground of the early 1800s, right on the heels of the Louisiana Purchase. You know, the Mississippi River famously flows from north to south, but right at the site of Davenport, it takes this incredibly rare, sharp east to west turn. And that geographic quirk, it's absolutely everything. It created a natural choke point, making this specific stretch of water and land highly, highly prized. I mean, whoever controlled this bend controlled the flow of goods and people. It completely dictated the area's strategic development and set the stage for decades of conflict, and eventually explosive urban growth. Before there were paved streets or neighborhoods, this land was fiercely contested ground. The early 1800s out here were defined by heavy, constant tension between the British military, an incredibly expansionist U.S. government, and the indigenous Sauk and Meskwaki nations. This wasn't just political posturing either. This tension boiled over into actual bloody skirmishes right near the present-day city during the War of 1812. By 1816, to lock down that crucial east-to-west bend in the river and protect the highly lucrative fur trade, the United States government established Fort Armstrong on nearby Rock Island. This imposing military stronghold, sitting right smack in the middle of the river, was the true seed of the future city. Section 2. Founders of the new city. Entrepreneurs, treaties, and the first settlement. Out of that muddy, hyper-militarized zone around Fort Armstrong steps our first founder, George Davenport. Born in England, Davenport was what's known as a sutler. Basically, that's a civilian merchant who sells provisions to an army in the field. He positioned himself perfectly within that rough frontier economy, setting up shop to supply the soldiers at the fort. It was a highly lucrative role. He built immense wealth and political influence by capitalizing heavily on both that constant military presence and the surrounding booming fur trade. Working right alongside Davenport was a guy named Antoine LeClaire, and honestly, he's the indispensable linchpin of this entire story. LeClaire was a man of mixed French and Potawatomi descent. Now, in a deeply divided and tense political landscape, his unique heritage and his fluency in multiple languages made him exceptionally rare and valuable. He acted as a crucial cultural mediator and interpreter between the U.S. government and the indigenous nations. Because he was actually trusted across these incredibly hostile dividing lines, his status allowed him to negotiate and eventually acquire the vast, sprawling tracts of land that would literally form the footprint of the new city. It is absolutely mind-blowing how fast this area went from a bloody war zone to a permanent settlement. In 1832, the Black Hawk Treaty was signed, following the violence of the Black Hawk War, officially shifting the land over to permanent American settlement. Now get this, acting on a specific stipulation from Chief Keokuk, Antoine LeClaire constructed the very first home, known as the Treaty House, on the exact spot where the peace treaty was signed. He literally built his living room over a historic battlefield peace agreement. Then, just 4 years later, in 1836, LeClaire and George Davenport formally collaborated to establish the city that would forever bear Davenport's name. To put that staggering speed into perspective, let's trace this out. In 1832, we have the treaty. By 1836, the first settlement. In 1839, Davenport is officially incorporated as a city. And by 1840, after a fierce and really bitter local rivalry, Davenport defeated the nearby town of Rockingham to become the official county seat. In a span of just 8 years, this patch of land transformed from a treaty signed on a battlefield into an established, dominant political hub. Section 3. Immigrants and Early Growth. The German Influence on the Social Fabric. So, the political foundation is set.
Now, enter a massive wave of German immigrants in the mid-19th century fleeing severe political instability back in Europe. They poured into this rough frontier town and completely reshaped its identity. They brought vital labor and capital, sure, but more importantly, they brought a deep cultural emphasis on education, the arts, and civic order. Think about the stark contrast here. In a muddy river town built around old forts and trading posts, these immigrants settled heavily in a neighborhood overlooking the river, known as the Gold Coast. They built stunning hilltop homes and cemented a sophisticated, vibrant social fabric right into the city's DNA.
Section 4. The Great Railroad Bridge Battle, the engineering feat that divided the nation.
Okay, we have now arrived at the absolute climax of Davenport's early history, the explosive events of 1856. In that year, a genuinely world-changing engineering feat was achieved right in Davenport, the completion of the very first railroad bridge ever to cross the mighty Mississippi River. Engineers utilized the stable limestone foundation of the Rock Island Rapids to support these massive, heavy bridge piers. This was completely revolutionary. It finally linked the booming eastern rail networks directly to the vast open western frontier, entirely bypassing the need for steamboat ferries. It was the physical key to westward expansion.
But of course, this brilliant engineering marvel ignited the most massive economic conflict of the era. It's a classic clash of titans. On one side, you have the old, established guard, the riverboat industry. For decades, they relied on the natural north-south waterways and held a complete, unchallenged monopoly on transportation. Now, looking at this bridge, they were staring down the barrel of total obsolescence. On the other side, you have the new frontier, ascending railroad corporations building their tracks from east to west, straight over the river, relentlessly pushing American expansion. This was a fierce, existential war between two totally competing visions of commerce.
And that tension, it literally caught fire. Just 2 weeks after the bridge opened, on May 6, 1856, a steamboat named the Effie Afton mysteriously veered drastically off course and crashed right into the new railroad bridge. Both the steamboat and a massive section of the bridge went up in flames. This spectacular crash, which, by the way, almost everyone suspected was intentional, desperate sabotage by the steamboat industry, ignited a landmark, fiercely contested legal war known as Heard v. Rock Island Bridge Company. To defend their bridge in court, the railroad hired a highly skilled and soon-to-be very famous attorney named Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln stepped right into this corporate war and successfully argued an incredibly powerful concept, the right to span navigable waters for the purpose of interstate commerce. He brilliantly argued that a person had just as much right to travel east to west over a river as someone else had to travel up and down it. This massive turning point didn't just save the bridge in Davenport. Long before he was president, Lincoln's victory here set a national precedent that permanently cleared the legal hurdles for the entire American transcontinental railroad. Section 5. Legacy of the Frontier. From 19th century rails to modern hub. You might be wondering, why does all this 19th century frontier drama about sutlers, treaties, and steamboat crashes matter to us today? Well, because Lincoln's legal victory permanently established Davenport's economic destiny. By securing its status as a vital rail hub, the city was able to transition from early frontier logging and milling into high-value manufacturing, aerospace, and heavy machinery. Thanks to that hard-fought east-to-west bridge, Davenport evolved into a prime logistics center on the Interstate 80 corridor, creating a robust economy that today supports over 500,000 residents in the integrated Quad Cities labor market. You can feel that massive industrial legacy right now. Thousands are employed locally by heavy industry and logistics giants. We're talking 7,500 people at John Deere in agricultural manufacturing, over 2,500 at Arconic making aerospace aluminum, 1,500 at Amazon in logistics. All of these massive global operations still leverage the very same rail and river access that George Davenport, Antoine LeClaire, and Abraham Lincoln fought so intensely to establish way back in the 1800s. But it's not just about industry. The city continues to deeply innovate its relationship with the river itself. Today, Davenport is investing $16.4 million in the Main Street Landing Park. Rather than fighting nature with huge concrete barriers, this project is uniquely designed to actually be submerged during floods and then quickly recover, fully embracing the natural, sometimes violent rhythms of the Mississippi. Which leaves us with this final, truly fascinating thought. Uniquely among major cities on the Mississippi, Davenport never built a permanent flood wall. It made a philosophical choice to live directly with the river that created it, adapting with flood resilience instead of just pure resistance. Considering everything we've covered in this explainer, from those early frontier skirmishes to raging bridge fires, how will this bold, open-armed strategy to the river's immense power define the next century of this incredibly resilient frontier city? Think about that the next time you see the mighty Mississippi. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into Davenport's history.